Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Walter Moore, and I'm here on behalf of the Forum Planning Committee to welcome you to this program. As you can already see, this is not your ordinary Forum program. We've got special things here, and it will be a somewhat complicated program, but it will be memorable. And I'm really looking forward to it, as I know you are as well. My role is simply to welcome you and to say that to introduce today's program is Almina Pettit, who has made the arrangements for this. So without further ado, let me introduce Almina.
Thank you, Walter. Couple of things, housekeeping. This was left in the men's room. If anybody's... Leslie, you didn't leave it in the men's room. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, good. On the table over there is a notebook. If you would like to receive our reminder emails about forum programs, put your name and email address there. As Walter said, it's going to be a little complicated, a lot of moving parts today. I first heard about this two regimes from Tom Flanagan when he was here back whenever that was here, you remember. I'd never heard about all this that was going on, so when I started researching it, that had a major exhibition at the top of the Capitol, a seminar at FSU, and I thought, where have I been? But at any rate, Mimi Shaw, I contacted Mimi Shaw, who was responsible, who located the diaries and the paintings that were left by a Ukrainian family in a basement in Greenville, Florida. And they represented the stories of the Holodomor, which was the Russian starvation of the Ukrainian people in 1933, and the Holocaust of Hitler. And these two women survived both of those events, and you'll hear about what they did. Following, and then had they got to Tallahassee, that's another story. Diane Dupuy Whitney, who is truly a Wonder Woman in Tallahassee, who directs plays, writes musicals, writes the lyrics, wrote the play Theodora about the mother who wrote the diaries. And she wrote and produced all of that. And she's going to speak about that process. And Deborah Brigman, who was known by many of you as a local performer, will be singing some of the songs from the play Theodora. Following that, we'll have our questions and answers. And then following the question and answers, we're going to serve refreshments. So if any of you all in the back want to come on up to the front so you can be served, we'll have refreshments afterwards. And there are note cards on the tables. So Mike Rashad has put together a slideshow of all the programs we've had for the last 10 years. This is the end of our 10th year celebration. Take a look at them as they're scrolling through and write down which ones you liked, which ones you'd like to have updates on. Some of the things that were issues 10 years ago, where is that today? So we'd really like to get feedback for our future programs. And then following the cake and ice cream, you can go home. But thank you all for coming. And Mimi Shaw,
What?
come on up.
I think I have a mic on,
Okay,
so I'm good. She'll take that one. So my name is Mimi Shaw, and you probably may recognize my voice because I recognize some people. Myself, Deborah Brigman, Diane Whitney, and my husband, Coach Perry Shaw, we're all graduates of Florida State University, and we're all educators. And Deborah, Diane, and myself, and Perry, we have a local children's entertainment company known as BJ's Party House. So it may be that we've done or been to your kids or grandkids or great-grandkids' parties. It's been a long time as a graduate of Florida State School of Theater. It's been a long time. So we recognize some faces. Thank you for having us. I think what Almina wanted me to address is something that I never, ever really speak a lot about because it's so important, the content of what we have here. But Almina said, you have to tell people about where this came from and what's this Tallahassee connection. So I'm going to tell you this, but first I'm going to let Deborah talk a little bit about, from Lucy Vanalar's perspective, that's the daughter of the artist, the granddaughter of the author. And she sent a statement about why it was where it was.
Good afternoon. I want to tell you how the paintings got to Greenville, Florida. Look around. Look at these paintings. They were in Greenville, Florida. Nadia Verbitsky was a prolific artist who was trained at the Dusseldorf Academy of the Arts in Dusseldorf, Germany. Nadia also had the opportunity to study the works of masters while living in Europe. Painting was also a therapy for a person who lived through 2 genocides of the Holodomor and the Holocaust in Ukraine as a young child and a young adult. Nadia had 2 children, Lucienne, who was born in 1959, and Natalie, who was born in 1960 and lived until 2014. Theodora came to live with Nadia and her husband when the children were born so that Nadia could continue her painting. Theodora Verbitsky was Lucienne Vanalar's maternal grandmother. During her childhood and adolescence, Lucienne witnessed her grandmother handwrite 2 regimes, which was a memoir, in Cyrillic Imperial Russian cursive, and heard many recounted verbal details of the events of the memoir, told from the perspective of both Theodora Verbitskaya and Lucy's mother, Nadia Verbitsky's beautiful artwork, as these were family experiences and family stories. When Lucy graduated from high school, Theodora asked her to translate the memoir into English. But instead, Lucy left to attend college, then married and never returned to her home of origin. Her grandmother passed away in 1994, and her father passed away in 1996. Nadia spent time between Natalia and Lucy's home when she could. Lucy helped bring Nadia and her paintings to Greenville in the late 1990s. While in Greenville, Nadia struck up a friendship with a neighbor, Carla, who was of similar age and lived in Italy during the war under Mussolini. They had shared experiences. Nadia then returned up north. So that is how the paintings got to Greenville. The next part is painful, and I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation where you had to flee and leave everything that was dear to you, but that is what had happened. Mimi and Kelly have always said that there was divine providence in this collection, and God has provided a way for Theodora's story and Nadia's artwork to survive and flourish and allow me to finally do as my grandmother requested and translate her memoir into English. I am so grateful. Lucienne Vanalar, June 2023.
So Lucy lives in West Virginia, and we didn't know anything about Lucy for 20 years. So 3 years ago, we got a phone call from Lucy who said, I read the book, the manuscript was translated by Michael Carmarda, and who was a student of mine at Maclay. And he translated it, and actually Rabbi Garfein also put one of the first quotes on the book back in the day. This is in 2000 that this was, well, no, sorry, it's 2012. They were discovered in 2000. So we have a lot of history here. Let me tell you about why I'm standing in front of these paintings, and thank you so much. So I've been a professional clown for a long time. My poor husband has been married to a clown, and they kid him. But these pictures, I received a phone call from a quick sketch artist that works with us. He's a rural quick sketch artist, Cornelius Barnhart, and he said, Mimi, I know your dad was a Buchenwald liberator. I know he was Patton's radio operator at the Battle of the Bulge. Only 7 of them made it in. And Cornelius had studied with my dad in his gallery in Georgia. And he said, there's a bunch of these paintings. They're under a house. They're in the dirt. And the place is being foreclosed on. Why don't you come and look at them? So I was like, oh, my goodness. So I was still dressed as a clown. And we drove way out to the middle of nowhere in the woods. I couldn't find it again for the longest because it was so rural, so grown up, and it was a hand-built house. They were all underneath the house, and it was stilted. So I'm dressed like that on the bottom picture as BJ the Clown, and I come across a painting that looks like this. And the first thing I felt was connection. I didn't know what I was looking at. This is an original, by the way. It's not been restored yet. And pictures like the Pierrot clowns, and pictures like this Ukrainian clown. And I had no idea. So I had instantly had this, what is this? And so I started to take pictures of the images. Also included, which I didn't know later, but was a manuscript of 118 pages that became this book that's been funded under the legislature for through the Foundation for Leon County Schools that our students have been studying since 2012. And thank you, Rabbi, for your contribution in this. My dad had authored a book, so I considered my father to be an expert. I lost my father 10 years ago. This was his book, Dig and Dig Deep, about how they lost 150 men at the Battle of the Bulge, and how the 7 of them made it into Buchenwald, and he was the first Jewish man into Buchenwald to liberate that camp. So it took him 8 years before he passed to do this, but I was very fortunate to be able to take some pictures now in our technology and say, Dad, these are some of the images. There's a couple that are original. There are 118 oil paintings and 150 sketches, and this manuscript that's 118 pages. So I took a picture of this image, and it was a big image. I don't have it here, but it was a camp. I thought it was a concentration camp, and it was 2 soldiers that were rolling a cigarette, and they had numbers on their hats, numbers on their pockets, and hundreds of people behind them toiling. I took the picture, I sent it to Dad. I said, Dad, is this a Holocaust painting? And he looked at it, he saw the numbers, and he saw the letters, and he said, that's a Russian internment camp. And I had never heard of a Russian internment camp. I had no idea what that was. And he said, what are you looking at? And I said, just hundreds of images under a house in the dirt in rural Florida. And we're from New York. So he said, whatever it is, honey, whatever you have to do, you get those paintings and you save them all. So my inspiration came from my father, and he's still with me in this mission. And my very good friends that I've been friends with for 40 years, and Kelly Bowen, who is not here, and Lucy, who has contacted us 20 years into this, and all of the people from Florida State, and now from Canada, from Italy, and from the world, actually. There are people that are involved in this project in the last 23 years that make us feel like we really have something that's really important here in Tallahassee. So I think, so this, I'm really bad with these speeches, so please forgive me. This is a picture of Teodora, and these pictures I took myself. It took me 1.5 years to find her, and the way that I found her was I just started knocking on doors and in the woods and asking anybody, do you know who lived in this house? Do you know how I can find them? And I met this woman, Carla, and Carla looked at me and she sized me up, this little Italian woman in her 80s, and she said, come right in, young lady, I've been waiting for you. And give me bumps again, too. And I said, thank you. And I went in and I sat on her couch, and she said, I have some hot chocolate. Would you like hot chocolate? And she said, what can I do to help you? And I said, I just bought, well, it took a month to buy them all, and keep going back. But I said, I'm looking for the artist. And I didn't even know in the trunks, because there were trunks under this house. And I said, yeah, I'll give you $100 for that trunk and $75 for that. I didn't even know what was in them. Dad just said, you get everything that's there. So I didn't know where I was going to get all the money, but I was going to get it. So I kept telling the guy he was going to have an estate sale the next day. I said, if you'll just let me buy all of these images and some of these other things. And people, the next day were upstairs buying all kinds of stuff, silver and furniture and stuff. And he said, okay. So I went home, and I had just been married. And I said, honey, I need to take my inheritance. And I have to buy a bunch of stuff under this house in the dirt. And I thought, oh my God, we just got married. He said, you know what, honey? If that's what you feel you need to do, if that's in your heart, then you do that. And my husband has been supportive and been schlepping paintings around with me for 23 years. He's been my soul. So we went back and kept going back, and we found, so I was buying pottery, and I was buying actually stuff from churches, some Ukrainian churches and stuff, pewter things and all kinds of things. But in one of those trunks, in this trunk, I bought like 4 or 5, was a termite-eaten manuscript that was so disgusting, with some paintings that just disintegrated when you picked them up. They just fell apart. And in there was this manuscript, and this manuscript was tied together. It was between like paper bags. It looked like paper bags for the cover, and big rings, like hoop earrings, and there were 3 of them. And it was all handwritten, and it was all in this Cyrillic Russian and had to be interpreted. But we didn't really find that until about a month later, because it was a process of trying to get enough money together to buy everything that was there. So the woman that I found after 1.5 years, also in that trunk were her entitlement as being a concentration camp survivor. So I found this paperwork, and I was told, you know what? You don't know what these people are about. You don't know if this is KGB. You don't know. So you better be really careful if you go looking for this person. So I opened the conversation by telling her, my family, I've lost my family members and so forth. And I found her name on a list, and I have paperwork that belongs to her. And I think it was about $7,000 or $8,000. And that's how I began my first letter. This is my name, this is who I am, this is what I have. And it took 1.5 years, but she responded. And then she invited me to go to Baltimore to actually meet her. So in this picture, that's myself and Nadia on the top right. She's the artist. And that's what I brought to her on the bottom. That's a metal cross that's all engraved. And the cane has metal plates from all over the world. They were her mother's. And then this is, there's a second manuscript we haven't even started working with, but she also had parakeets, so that's parakeets. And that's a picture of Teodora Verbitskaya. That's her mother. That's the author. So the author is the mother, and the artist, after the war, was able to study at Cologne and Dusseldorf and paint these paintings. And this one is amazing because this is the young lady that called us 20 years later on the right-hand side, and that's her grandmother who raised her. They just look so much alike. This woman speaks 13 languages. And in the new book that's being printed by Hunt Publishers for education worldwide, she's doing the ebook. There's a lot more that Almina will tell you about that because I'm not the book person. I'm just the how you found it person. But I think that's the end of that slide, Dakota. This slide is probably one of the most important paintings in the entire collection. This is not a very good G-clay of it, and a G-clay, of course, is a copy. But this is Mariupol, Ukraine. And this painting is called Hell's Threshold. This is Teodora with the bun. She painted herself into the painting. And on the right side is Lucy, who became the artist, of course, who survived this. And this is Natalie. And they painted themselves in chapter 11 of the book. She talks about all of these people. This is 7,500 Jews being led through the streets of Mariupol. And this mama ran back to her apartment to get the little rag doll for her daughter that left it at the apartment. And she's running with the baby over her shoulder and their possessions to catch up with the procession. The reason that you see like violin cases and faces, because in this manuscript, it's the names of the people, who they were. First was the lawyers, then there were the doctors, then were the teachers, and there's Rusha Halprin, and there's this one and that one. Never have I ever thought finding a manuscript that tells the names of the people, where they were, what happened, the names of the commandants. They were being led through the streets of Mariupol, and they were being led to the outskirts of the city where they were shot by these guards and pushed into the very same trenches they're digging in, that dug in Mariupol today. This is the same playbill. This is the same genocide. This is Putin's continuation of the genocide of the Ukrainian people. And Tallahassee has this vetted. This was vetted in Ukraine for 2 years prior to the invasion. Safarziria University compared this to the KGB files, found this to be true. So, we are not experts, but we've started working with Canada, the Holodomor Resource Institute, and they suspected very highly that this was a Ukrainian resource, and it truly is. So I think we're ready for the next slide. The next slide, I'm not on my notes. Oh,
the Jews had been left alone
I don't know if we can
and
turn
walked
this down.
about
The
freely,
lights down.
although the authorities were keeping track of them. On a certain day, old man Gorlin, who had been a neighbor, came knocking on my door and informed us that the Germans had ordered the Jews to pack up their belongings and prepare to leave. By evening of the same day, we watched as they were led down the street toward the military barracks outside of the city. By the time we ran outside, the first column had already passed the house. In front were the rabbis, the doctors and their families, and the Jewish intelligentsia. Next were the elderly supported under the arms, the sick on stretchers, and the children walked along, carrying knapsacks and small bundles. The procession moved very slowly. After the last column passed, and the convoy had all but disappeared from view, we saw a young woman running with 2 children, desperately trying to catch up. She held an infant under one arm. Clutching her other hand was a 3-year-old girl, dragging a large doll. The guards had apparently forgotten about them. That doll was slowing them down, so the mother grabbed the girl with the doll and placed her on top of a bundle that was tied to her arm. Then she continued running, trying to catch up with her people. It was difficult to believe that they would shoot down 7,500 people for no reason. But several days later, they were executed and buried in those same trenches that we had dug around the city before the Germans arrived. A vile, inhuman, and criminal act had taken place in history.
So that was Daria Karmarda, and that was her narration. You can go to YouTube and you can see some of the free work that educators have been doing over all these years for teachers, and this was one of the narrations. You can hear it with the heavy accent, you can hear it with a more of an American accent. And so that is just one excerpt. The manuscript is, of course, being the book is being republished, and there will be lots for that. There'll be lots of more footnotes and maps and so forth. But we're ready for the next slide. So what we've been working with, because when we found this, we're educators. So, we weren't art experts. We knew that this was an important resource. We didn't know how important this resource would be. We didn't even know for 12 years. Hi, Melissa. We didn't even know for 12 years that this was about the Holodomor. It was already titled 2 Regimes, A Mother's Memoir of Wartime Survival. The title was 2 Regimes, and Teodora had entitled it. So we didn't realize until we started collaborating with Canada what Holodomor was, and how is Holodomor relevant to Holocaust, and how is it relevant to what's happening to today. And thankfully we know now, and thankfully we've been able to, through COCA, the city of Tallahassee, and our legislature, write these educational grants through the Foundation for Leon County Schools, make banner exhibitions with this, work with the history teachers, and most recently, to write a play that can be replicated anywhere in the world. We're trying to think of creative ways to have this resource reach as many people as possible, and we're finding a lot of interest in this. So we have the exhibitions, the grants, there's a film. If you are affiliated with a school, you can go to 2regimes.com and you can request a 22-minute film in education. And so this is so it doesn't get on social media, it doesn't go anywhere else. It's what we don't all know. This is a bona fide school in Colorado or wherever it might be. We know where they are, and teachers have access to this short film. We are also working on a documentary film about this resource, all about this resource, and of course the book will be finished in publication in just a few short months by the end of the summer. Next slide. Did you want to talk a little bit about? Okay, so the new memoir is a new translation by Lucy. She's incredibly brilliant. We were able to have her come down when the state of Florida invited us to 3 years ago to take this exhibition to the 22nd floor of the Capitol. So it had an exhibition there, and COCA helped us with that. It was selected from artwork from across the state. And unfortunately, at that time, Russia invaded Ukraine. We started taking Ukrainian families into Tallahassee. Students were studying it. We wrote into the grant for students to be bused to the Capitol, students who had never been to the Capitol, who'd been studying this work in their classrooms, to come up to the Capitol to experience the art for themselves. And we brought in musicians and speakers and educators, and so we bussed in 1,200 students, and they asked us to extend the exhibition for another 3 months. So an unprecedented 6 months at the top of the Capitol for the state of Florida was what we were able to do, and to work with all the foundations for all of education throughout the state for this to become made aware to educators. There's 286 pages, there's 51 color paintings, there's 27 historical photographs, there's 101 footnotes, all researched diligently by Lucy, and there's a color 8.5 by 11 book and an ebook. They'll be available by the end of the year, and we are hoping that, you know, we were very fortunate to have one benefactor that stepped up and provided us with $40,000. That had never happened before. This has all been retirement funds and stuff that we've been just doing, and that has been so helpful. That allowed us to hire a PR firm here in Tallahassee to help us. It allowed us to continue the work on the play that you'll hear some excerpt from today, and to create a mini exhibition of the banner exhibition that is now in 3 different states and circulating in those states. So that was just a blessing, and we just have to say thank you, and that's that one. The FSU connection, which is important to all of us, because all of us that have been working on this forever, for 2 decades now, it started back in 2003, and we were invited to 7 opening nights. I don't know if any of you went to go see Olympia Dukakis. Did anybody see Rose? She came here and did Rose, and we were invited to have a mini exhibition at a private reception for her and VIP guests. And then also in 2003, simultaneously, a large number of the paintings were exhibited for the first time in the Claude Pepper Changing Gallery. So that was really our first exhibition at Florida State. Then thank you to Dr. David Gussick, who we love very, very much. He understood from the first time I met him, I think it was at Hopkins, and schlepped a bunch of paintings over there, and he was like, these are amazing. We need to get an exhibition. I will work with the FSU, with MOFA, and we're gonna write a grant. So they wrote a grant, and it was sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts, and they were able to frame some of them. Remember, this is a project that's had no budget since we found it, except to buy it. And they framed it. They framed the art pieces they wanted, and we had our first exhibition. We've had 3 at Florida State at the Fine Arts Building. So he was able to see what it was, and he is still working with us to this day on this project. We just can't thank him enough. The launch of the Two Regimes Film for Education, we were invited by the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights at Florida State to present this film that took 4 years to create for teachers that they can use. It's free. All I have to do is ask for it. So they hosted that. It was well attended by educators, and so that happened. And the question mark is what's next? We don't know what's next. But that's that slide. So at this time, I'm going to give this to you to read Kathleen's, and I'm going to introduce to you. First of all, I want to thank my husband back there, who's so patient, helped me schlep all this stuff in, and Diane Dupuy Whitney, who's the mastermind behind writing this musical production that you will hear three of the pieces from. And Deborah Brigman, who is your vocalist and who the play was really written for her vocals. Thank you.
Before I go ahead and read this, I want to tell you just a little snippet. Thank you, Mimi. When I was able to meet Lucy this past fall, one thing when she was talking to us all, especially a lot of the international students that were present in the room who had just fled from Ukraine, she said, when I was a little girl, my mother, who is the artist, could never talk about the Holodomor or the Holocaust. But what she did, whenever she drove, guess what was in the trunk of her car? A canvas and paints. And everywhere she went, her mother would drag out a canvas and just start painting. But she could never talk to her kids about what happened. So can you imagine? This is such an incredible opportunity for all of us to be involved in and to think, Greenville, Florida. Mamma mia. So this is a review of Teodora that was written by Kathleen Spahar. COCA commends the Teodora creative team's vision in developing and producing this musical, bringing the true life story of Ukrainian Teodora Verbiskaya, a witness to both the Holodomor and the Holocaust, on stage in song and movement was a mammoth community effort. The production brought writers together, composers, singers, dancers, visual artists, directors, theater designers, and other creative partners to collaborate on creating the artistic elements needed to tell Teodora's story effectively. It allowed communities to experience the reality Ukrainian families faced through a multidisciplinary art performance. The arts powerfully connected our lived experiences, growing our empathy and understanding for each other. Teodora did this, reminding us how sharing our stories through the arts can transform our minds, hearts, and communities.
Thank you.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it. You ready? Diane's going to speak about writing it.
So how do you take a story like this and make it meaningful and beautiful and painful? Of course, the tool is music because it goes deep into the heart. We all know that. And we took the experiences that Teodora had had and blended them into the places that she had been and her relationship with her family. She was married and had these two little children that she had to take care of when her husband was taken away to a prison camp because he had said a couple of things that were not acceptable politically. And what I'm going to do is to introduce each of these songs and then go over there to the piano and play. So give us a second. At the beginning of this story, Teodora is being interviewed by an official of the international program that was developed by 43 countries after World War II. We call it the Displaced Persons Program, and it brought millions of people to different places and new lives. And she is being interviewed, and she tells the official about her experience having to be away from her husband and with taking care of her children.
We made our home in the village of Mancova. My husband was director of a school. He got in trouble, we had to leave because he broke some rules. We found a place in Paraprava, but he didn't want to stay. In Mariupol he looked for work, was arrested and sent away. For 6 long years I had 2 children. What could I do for 6 long years? Somehow I made it through. For 6 long years I had 2 children. What could I do for 6 long years? Somehow I made it through.
So as the script grew, we thought, well, maybe we could have a dance. 1 dance became 2 dances, 2 dances became 3. The dancers were able to express in their movements not only the joyfulness of the market in Mariupol, but also the sadness of the hunger of the people and the talk about this because I remember writing the songs, and I remember having read the story and how it grieved me that these people had to suffer like that. But I remember I was telling Deborah, I put my hands on the piano and just waited, and something would come. And I think it was because I was so very taken with this woman's story. So we had to have something cheerful, so this is our cheerful song. It is the market in Mariupol. A lot of research was required to find out what did they sell at the market. And it turns out that Teodora and her children would go to the market and not buy a lot, but there was a drink that they would buy. There was a sweet drink, and they liked that. So that's incorporated in the story.
At the market, everywhere you look, there was something to buy and to cook. Vegetables, meat, fruit, and fish. Anything you'd wish. Oh, and then there was the bread. Bubliki, kifla, baranki, and kisel so sweet. Bubliki, kifla, baranki, and kisel so sweet. Clap. At the market, there was plenty to eat. There was music and dancing in the street. How could we know that so soon it would end? At the market in Mariupol, but that was then.
So the final song we're going to do for you is Camps. Sorry, it's not a very cheerful song. It is supposed to convey some sense of the despair that was felt by the people in the camps. I'm old enough to have grown up with a lot of pictures on the TV of the refugees going down the road and the people in dire straits. So this song is especially meaningful to me. I hope you enjoy it, Camps.
A camp is a place without a human face. They lock you away and you live day by day, and the world forgets you. The person you'd be disappears in what you see. You try to be blind to the thoughts in your mind, but the camp won't let you. Proweile Deutschen born, Julisch, Köln, and Obladen, these names are burned in my heart, never to be forgotten. Sometimes I dream of home, blue skies, fields filled with flowers, but then when I awake, I only see walls and towers. A camp is a place without a human face. They lock you away and you live day by day, and the world forgets you.
So, thank you so much, y'all. We did this play, Teodora, and the concept was a communiversity concept. So what we did, and we wrote a grant, and we got $12,000 to put it all together, and that included everything, the rental of the theater and the costumes and the people and the payment and all of that. It was a shoestring. But what was important to us was it was held at a Title I school, which is Godby High School. And what we wanted to do was to collaborate with a projection mapping concept. I know many of you have seen like the Van Gogh concept where it's immersive. So we asked Dr. Buscarin, Professor Buscarin from the FSU School of Art, if he would hold some workshops. And he and Kelly Bowen, who created the content from the images we had, they learned how to do projection mapping. And I don't know what your next slide is, Dakota. This is one of my favorite paintings. That's not the slide, but go ahead, because sorry, I'm not with this. What's the next one you've got? These are just some of the images, but these were projected on the ceilings, on the walls. They were done with the music. The students learned how to do it, and it was fabulous. I think we had like 7 or 8 cameras. Now what I'm looking for is, I have it as number 11 on here, but it's a picture of one of the projection mappings with the dancers. The dancers in the play were also Godby High School students. That's the image I was telling you. There it is. But if you go back just to that one image, yep. That's the one that I found that I called my father and said, Dad, is that a Holocaust camp? And he said, no, those are that's a Russian internment camp. Those are Russian letters. That's what that is. But then the next image, right there. So those are some Godby High School kids that are dancing. That's Deborah portraying Teodora. And that's just one of the walls that these images, that this art was projected onto, as well as like in here it would be the entire ceiling at the end. It was just wonderful. Now I think we do have an excerpt from Question of Power. The image looks like some red poppies. That's a vision for the future, but this one is that. And this is so powerful. Just, I think it's only one stanza of Diane's song. But if you can, I think it should be a film.
What kind of a man would take his soul and throw it away for the sake of control, destroying life in numbers untold? Who could be so cold? It was a question of power.
That's just one verse of this extremely prolific, and those high school kids, as a Title I school, full audience, they got it. They so understood.
There was not a dry, those students, there wasn't a dry eye in that. We have a future with our kids. When you think about our kids and you go, wah, 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 no, you should have been there.
Also, when at the end of the play, the official sings a song to her where he says, I heard your story and I know what I have to do. And he said, Miss Babitsky, you're going to get on that ship, the ship to freedom. And all the kids in the audience clapped. And, you know,
It was wonderful. It was absolutely, and so we, as educators, and as parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, we know that we have something here that's different, creative. I know there was a quote that I read, the arts have a power unlike any other. That's FSU Dean Richard McCullough. And this is a powerful exhibition. It's a powerful exhibition. It's a powerful play. It'll be a powerful documentary. And then the last one is, I think, the future. I think you put it up there and we're done. So the vision for the future is more collaboration and interdisciplinary collaboration. That's why we just went to Florida State to see, you know, music and art and theater and dance and you know, religion and liturgy and just all of these genres can sink their teeth into this resource. And different concentrations per field of study, campus-wide, large events. We can do this projection mapping anywhere, on any building. These projections can come to life. They can live to music. They can be with the words. And the potential for seed funding is there. There are grants, and we are looking for actionable results. Any ideas anybody have? You're all educators and super smart people. You may know people. We're looking for all of that. And I think that was the last slide.
Gosh, this is just, hello. Been wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So much. We have a minute or two for some questions. The food's going to be brought out right now. If you all want to come to the table or whatever. So stay for a cupcake, and then the slides of our previous shows are going to be on. So please take a card and write your thoughts about that. And if you all can stay around a little bit, I'm sure people will have a few questions. One thing about the book, I'm going to try to let everybody know when it does come out. The audio book's going to be read by Lucy and other members of her family, which will be wonderful because some books are now done by AI, but they weren't there. You know, AI wasn't there. So the feeling and the emotion and the understanding that's going to come. So I don't know which to do, to get the audio book and hear it, or the book it's going to be more like a coffee table book almost, with the pictures and all that, and the ebook. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you all for coming. Does anybody have a question?
Do you know when the play will be produced next, when available? When it's the next production of the play?
We are looking for another venue, yes.
Will it fit on our stage?
I think it would.
Oh, please, please.
I'll talk to the boss.
I'm not the boss of
About
anybody.
30 or 40 people from here went to the play. We had a bus one night, and then some people went the other night too, and it was just remarkable. So I hope we can do it again. Other questions? Anybody else? Okay. Where's the food?
I
Where's
wanted
the
to know
food?
what the condition of the paintings were and if they were under a house. All of them? Oh my gosh.
The way that Kelly has framed them is amazing. All of our frames, by the way, for 2 years were donated by Goodwill. So we were looking for these really old wooden frames, and Kelly is a curator, so she disassembled them when these paintings, and some of these are originals. I'm trying to see which is up there is original. But they were made different sizes. This is my favorite. This is still original. It's not restored. But she left a couple of them the way she framed them so students could learn about the termite tracks that were in them, how they had to be stretched and re-stretched. So that in itself also became a learning experience for the students. But no, they were under house for 4 to 6 years, so they were underneath a dirty tarp. I mean, that's it. They're amazing. Yes, ma'am.
I can't help but ask, because I'm looking at all of these, and I've seen this presentation before, but this one keeps drawing me because it's unlike any other one. And I don't know exactly how to describe it myself, but it isn't as sad and, as the others. And so do you know anything about, it's so unique.
Her journey is before, during, and after. So many were, she loved clowns. So she loved the Pierrot. This one was during, I believe. And that's what drew me, was because why? Why? But it's amazing. And I don't know if did anybody know Dr. Ivan Johnson from Florida State? Okay. I used to teach at Maclay, so both of his daughters were the art teachers there while I was the drama teacher there. And so they said, go see Dad. So I schlepped all the paintings over to Dad. And what he did was he took the paintings and he put them in stacks. He said, this is important for France, this is important for Ukraine, this is important for Germany. And he was able to tell me that as an artist, a lot of these were developmental, as she was studying at Cologne and Dusseldorf. So some of these were, images that were created during, but many were developmental, and that's the best I can tell you as far as the answer goes. Anybody else? Thank you so much for having us. You guys have been wonderful.
Thank you, Mimi. This is just
tell you
terrific.
how much we appreciate
and Diane.
this.
And so everybody pay attention. You'll see how smart we've gotten in the last 10 years with these wonderful programs we've had. So please comment on the things you really liked and what you'd like to see in the future. It's going to be hard to top this program, however. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you again.